300 hunters surround the territory, silver weapons gleaming in the darkness. Elena stands between two worlds, 50 true wolves at her back, 6 werewolf packs looking to her for orders. One rejected Omega against an army that's been planning this genocide for 50 years. Tonight, everything changes. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The fire was dying, and Elena didn't have the strength to keep it alive. 3 days of walking through wilderness that seemed designed to kill her had drained everything she had left. Her feet were raw beneath the thin boots they'd allowed her to take, her stomach hollow from hunger, her lips cracked from thirst. The Omega who'd been banished from the Thornridge Pack was now just another creature waiting to die in the forest. Except she was too weak even for that final dignity. She'd built the pathetic fire in a small clearing, using the last match from her emergency kit and whatever dry twigs she could scrape together from beneath the snow. The flames sputtered and popped, throwing shadows that danced like mocking specters against the trees. Somewhere in the distance, something howled. Not the familiar sound of pack wolves, but something wilder, more ancient. Elena pulled her threadbare jacket tighter and tried not to think about what would find her first. The cold, the predators, or simply the exhaustion that was dragging her eyelids closed, despite every survival instinct screaming at her to stay alert. The rejection ceremony had been 5 days ago, though it felt like a lifetime. Colton Thornridge, the Alpha's son and her supposed destined mate, had stood before the entire pack and spoken words that still echoed in her mind like a curse. "I reject you, Elena Ashwood, as unworthy of the Thornridge bloodline. Your weakness dishonors my family. Your inability to shift dishonors our traditions, and your very existence is an embarrassment I refuse to bear." The pack had cheered, actually cheered, as if watching a 23-year-old Omega get her heart torn out in public was entertainment rather than cruelty. Elena's own mother had looked away, unwilling to meet her daughter's eyes. Her father had been dead for 6 years, killed in a border skirmish, and sometimes Elena thought that was a mercy. At least he didn't have to see what his daughter had become. A defective Omega who couldn't shift, couldn't feel pack bonds, couldn't do anything except fail at being what nature had designed her to be. The banishment had come swiftly. She'd been given 2 hours to gather her belongings, which amounted to almost nothing since Omegas in the Thornridge Pack weren't allowed to own much anyway. A change of clothes, a water bottle, the emergency kit her father had given her when she was 12, and the thin jacket that was doing absolutely nothing against the winter cold. Then they'd marched her to the territory border and told her if she ever came back, they'd kill her on sight. So here she was, dying alone in a forest that probably didn't even have a name, surrounded by darkness and cold, and the growing certainty that this was how it ended. Not with dignity or purpose, just with a sad whimper, as hypothermia shut down her brain and her heart stopped beating. The fire popped, sending a small shower of sparks into the air. Elena watched them rise and fall and found herself thinking about her grandmother, dead now for 10 years, but still the only person who'd ever made Elena feel like maybe being different wasn't the same thing as being broken. "Your gift will reveal itself when you're ready," her grandmother had whispered during one of their secret meetings in the forest. "The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, little one. What others call weakness is simply power they don't understand yet." Elena had been 8 years old and desperate to believe those words. Now she was 23 and knew better. There was no hidden gift, no secret power waiting to emerge. She was just defective, and her grandmother had been kind rather than truthful. Sometimes that was worse. A branch snapped somewhere beyond the firelight. Elena's head jerked up, her heart suddenly hammering despite her exhaustion. The sound came again, closer this time. Not the random crack of settling wood, but the deliberate step of something large moving through the underbrush. Something that was approaching her position with purpose. She should run. Every instinct said to run. But her legs wouldn't cooperate, too weak and too tired to do anything except keep her sitting upright. So she did the only thing she could do. She grabbed a burning stick from the fire and held it out like a weapon, knowing it was pathetic but unable to think of anything better. The trees at the edge of the clearing rustled. Then a wolf emerged, and Elena's breath caught in her throat, because this was not a normal wolf. It was massive, easily twice the size it should be, with fur so dark it seemed to absorb the firelight rather than reflect it. But what stopped her heart wasn't the size, it was the eyes. They were blue, bright crystalline blue that gleamed with an intelligence no animal should possess. And they were fixed on her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. The wolf took 3 steps into the clearing, then stopped. Its breathing was labored, harsh in the quiet night, and that's when Elena saw the blood. It matted the creature's side, dark and wet, trailing behind it in droplets that steamed slightly in the cold air. The wolf was injured, badly from the looks of it, and as she watched, it swayed slightly, as if struggling to stay upright. Elena should have felt afraid. This was a predator, wounded, and therefore dangerous, and she was alone and defenseless. But what she felt instead was something else entirely. Recognition, maybe, or kinship. 2 dying creatures meeting in the darkness, both too stubborn to lie down, accept the inevitable. The wolf's legs buckled. It went down hard, crashing onto its side with a sound that made Elena wince. Those blue eyes stayed open, though, locked on her face, and she saw something in them that shattered her completely. Resignation. The wolf knew it was dying, and it had come here not to hunt, but to find company in its final moments, to not die alone. Before she could think about how stupid it was, before rational thought could override instinct, Elena dropped the burning stick and crawled toward the wolf. Her body protested every movement, muscles screaming in exhaustion, but she ignored all of it. When she reached the creature's side, she saw the wound properly for the first time and felt bile rise in her throat. Something had torn into the wolf's flank, leaving gashes so deep she could see bone beneath the matted fur and blood. Silver, she realized. These were silver wounds, and they were killing the wolf slowly and painfully. Only werewolves use silver. Only werewolves would have reason to attack something this size with weapons designed to prevent healing. "You were hunted," Elena whispered, her hands hovering over the wound but not touching, not yet. "Someone did this to you on purpose." The wolf's eyes flickered, something that might have been agreement or acknowledgement. Its breathing was getting shallower, faster, the sound of lungs struggling to keep working despite trauma and blood loss. Elena looked at her emergency kit, still sitting by the fire where she'd dropped it. Her father's emergency kit, the one he'd made her promise to always keep with her. Inside were bandages, antiseptic, a small sewing kit, and pain medication. Not enough to properly treat wounds this severe, but maybe enough to slow the bleeding. Maybe enough to give this creature a few more hours of life. She was dying anyway. What did it matter if she used her last supplies on a wolf who was doing the same thing? At least this way they wouldn't both die alone. "I'm going to try something," Elena said, crawling back to the fire to retrieve the kit. "Probably going to hurt. If you want to bite me, I understand. But I can't just watch you bleed out when I might be able to help." The wolf made a sound, low and rumbling, that wasn't quite a growl. Its eyes followed her as she returned, kneeling in the bloody snow beside its body. Elena opened the kit with shaking hands and pulled out the antiseptic. This part was going to be agony for the creature, and she braced herself for teeth and claws and a quick death if the pain drove the wolf to attack. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and poured the antiseptic directly into the wounds. The wolf's body went rigid, every muscle locking in pain. A howl tore from its throat, raw and agonized, echoing through the forest like a warning or a prayer, but it didn't attack. Even through the pain, even as its body convulsed with the shock of antiseptic on exposed tissue, those blue eyes stayed fixed on Elena's face with something that looked almost like trust. Elena worked quickly, packing the wounds with bandages soaked in more antiseptic, then wrapping them as tightly as she could with the gauze from her kit. The wolf's breathing was still shallow, still labored, but the bleeding was slowing, not stopped, probably never going to stop completely without proper medical care, but slower. That was something. When she'd used every bandage in the kit, Elena sat back and wiped blood from her hands onto her already ruined jacket. The wolf was still watching her, those impossible blue eyes bright even in the dying firelight. There was something in that gaze that made Elena's chest ache. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition, as if the wolf understood what she'd sacrificed, understood that those supplies might have kept her alive another day or two, and she'd given them away for a stranger. "You're welcome," Elena said softly, then laughed at herself because she was talking to an animal, as if it could understand. The stress and exhaustion were clearly making her lose her mind. She fed more wood to the fire, using the last of the dry branches she'd collected. The flames rose higher, casting warmth over both of them. The wolf had stopped shaking, its breathing evening out into something that was still strained, but less desperate. Elena lay down beside it, too tired to care about propriety or safety, and felt the warmth of its body seeping into her frozen bones. "I was rejected," she heard herself saying into the darkness. "Not that you care, but it feels like I should tell someone. My pack threw me away because I couldn't shift, couldn't be what they wanted me to be. And the worst part is, I can't even blame them. What good is a wolf who can't be a wolf?" The creature beside her stirred, and Elena felt something press against her back. The wolf had shifted, curling its body around hers, sharing its heat despite its injuries. The gesture was so unexpected, so gentle, that Elena felt tears start to fall. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not leaving me alone, for letting me help you, for making my last night mean something." She fell asleep like that, curled against a dying wolf, both of them too broken to survive, but somehow finding comfort in shared suffering. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was that at least she'd done one good thing before the end. At least she'd tried to save something, even if she couldn't save herself. Elena woke to the sound of breathing, not the labored gasps of the wounded wolf from last night, but multiple breaths, steady and strong, creating small clouds of condensation in the freezing pre-dawn air. She opened her eyes slowly, confused and disoriented, and froze completely at what she saw. Wolves, dozens of them, surrounding the clearing in a perfect circle, all sitting or lying down, all watching her with eyes that gleamed in shades of gold and amber and green. But what made Elena's heart stop was the wolf directly in front of her. The massive, dark wolf she'd bandaged last night, now sitting upright, its wounds still visible beneath the wrappings but no longer bleeding, no longer dying. And it wasn't alone. Pressed against its side was another wolf, smaller and russet-colored, its eyes a warm gold. On the other side sat a white wolf with gray markings, massive and scarred. Beyond them, more wolves. Gray ones and brown ones and black ones, young and old, male and female. All different, but all watching her with the same focused intensity. Elena sat up slowly, her body protesting every movement, her mind struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. This wasn't normal. Wolves didn't gather like this. They didn't sit in perfect circles around dying humans. They didn't watch with expressions that suggested thought and purpose, rather than instinct and hunger. The dark wolf with blue eyes stood, and the movement sent a ripple through the entire circle. Every other wolf rose as well, creating a wall of fur and teeth and muscle that should have been terrifying, should have sent Elena scrambling for a weapon or trying to run despite knowing she'd never make it 3 steps. But she wasn't afraid. Standing there, surrounded by dozens of predators, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Safe. The dark wolf moved toward her, and Elena found herself reaching out without thinking, her hand connecting with its massive head. The moment her fingers touched its fur, something happened. A sensation flooded through her body, not quite physical and not quite emotional, but somewhere in between. Connection, understanding, recognition. She could feel them. Not just the dark wolf, but all of them. Every wolf in the clearing, their emotions and intentions flowing into her mind like water filling an empty vessel. They weren't here to hunt. They weren't here by accident. They were here because of her, because the dark wolf had called them, because something about what she'd done last night had awakened something that shouldn't exist. "Oh, goddess," Elena whispered, her hand still resting on the wolf's head, her entire body trembling with the enormity of what she was feeling. "You're not just wolves. You're a pack." The dark wolf made a sound that was almost like agreement. Then it did something that should have been impossible. It pressed its forehead against hers, and Elena heard a voice, not spoken aloud, but resonating in her mind with perfect clarity. "Alpha," the voice said, and it was male and ancient and absolutely certain. "You are Alpha." Elena jerked back, her heart racing. "That's not possible. I can't shift. I can't even feel pack bonds. I'm defective." The dark wolf's eyes seemed to gleam with something that might have been amusement. Not defective, different. Born to lead not shifted wolves, but true wolves. Born to be what the old legends called feral alpha. The other wolves began to move then, approaching one by one, each pressing their head against her hand or leg or shoulder. And with each touch, Elena felt the connection strengthen, felt her understanding deepen. These weren't werewolves, they were true wolves, the original children of the moon goddess, creatures that had roamed these forests long before humans learned to shift and form packs. And somehow, impossibly, she could speak to them, could understand them, could lead them. "This is why I couldn't shift," Elena breathed, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "I was never meant to be a werewolf. I was meant to be this." The dark wolf rumbled agreement. The goddess marks her chosen in different ways. "Your former pack rejected you because they could not see what you truly are. We see, we know, we claim you as ours." A russet-colored wolf pushed forward, smaller than the dark alpha but moving with confidence. This one's voice in Elena's mind was female and warm. "You saved our alpha's life last night when you had every reason to let him die. You gave your last supplies to a stranger, expecting nothing in return. That is true strength. That is what makes a leader worth following." Elena looked around at the assembled wolves, at the dozens of creatures watching her with expressions that held respect and recognition, rather than the disgust and disappointment she'd grown used to seeing in her pack's eyes. These wolves, these magnificent beings, thought she was worthy, thought she was strong, thought she was exactly what she was supposed to be. Tears started falling again, but this time they weren't tears of despair. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be what you need." The Dark Alpha's voice was gentle in her mind. "You already are what we need. You proved it last night when you chose compassion over survival. The rest we will teach you together." One of the younger wolves, a gray female with amber eyes, approached and dropped something at Elena's feet, a rabbit, freshly killed and still warm. Another wolf followed, placing a second rabbit beside the first. Then more, bringing food and laying it at her feet until Elena was surrounded by enough meat to feed her for days. "You're feeding me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "We are pack," the russet wolf said simply. "Pack takes care of each other. You are alpha. We provide." Elena sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the gesture, by the acceptance, by the sudden shift from dying alone to being surrounded by creatures who valued her. She'd spent 23 years being told she was worthless, being treated like a burden, being rejected by everyone who was supposed to love her. And now, in the space of one night, she'd found a family that saw her clearly and chose her anyway. The Dark Alpha lay down beside her, his wounds still needing care, but his eyes bright with life that had been absent last night. The other wolves settled around them, creating a warm circle of bodies that protected Elena from the wind and cold. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Elena felt something shift inside her chest, not a pack bond, not the connection she'd always failed to feel with werewolves, but something older and deeper and infinitely more powerful. She was feral alpha, leader of the true wolves, and her pack was just beginning. But the story of how Elena went from rejected omega to powerful alpha didn't end in that clearing. What happened next would test everything she thought she knew about herself, about power, and about the ancient conflict between werewolves and true wolves that had been simmering beneath the surface for generations. 3 weeks passed in what felt like a dream. Elena learned to survive in ways she'd never imagined, guided by her pack of true wolves who taught her to hunt, to read the forest, to understand the language of scent and sound that most werewolves had forgotten. The Dark Alpha, who she'd named Shadow for obvious reasons, remained by her side constantly, his wounds healing slowly but steadily under her care. The russet wolf, who Elena had named Ember for her fierce spirit, became her closest companion and teacher. It was Ember who showed Elena how to run with the pack, how to communicate through subtle body language and emotion rather than words, how to see the world through senses sharper than any human should possess. But here's what Elena hadn't expected. Her ability to communicate with true wolves was growing stronger with every passing day, expanding in ways that should have been impossible. She could feel them from miles away now, could sense their emotions and intentions, even when they were out of sight, could call them to her with nothing but a thought. And the pack was growing. Word spread through the true wolf population, passed along through methods Elena didn't fully understand, that a feral alpha had emerged, the first one in over 2 centuries. Lone wolves began appearing at the edges of her territory, watching from the shadows, testing to see if the legends were true. When Elena called to them, when she showed them she could truly hear and understand them, they joined, one by one, then in small groups, until her pack numbered over 50 wolves. 50 wolves who looked to her for leadership, who trusted her to keep them safe, who had chosen her as their alpha despite her being human, or mostly human. Elena was starting to wonder if she'd ever been fully human at all. Shadow explained it to her one evening as they sat watching the pack settle in for the night. "You carry the old blood," he said, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. The goddess's first children were neither wolf nor human, but something in between. Shapeshifters came later, diluting the pure bloodline. But sometimes, very rarely, the old blood emerges true. You are what our ancestors were meant to be. Bridge between worlds. Elena processed this information slowly. So I'm not defective. I'm just a throwback to something ancient. Not throwback, Shadow corrected gently. Evolution. The goddess knew werewolves were losing their connection to the true wolves, losing the old ways. So she created you, a leader who could speak to both worlds, who could remind the shapeshifters that we are all children of the moon. It was a beautiful thought. It was also terrifying because it meant Elena had a responsibility that extended far beyond just keeping her pack fed and safe. She was supposed to bridge a gap that had been widening for centuries, supposed to heal a rift between true wolves and werewolves that most of both species didn't even know existed. No pressure or anything, Elena muttered. An ember, lying nearby, made a sound that was definitely amusement. The first real test came on a cold morning exactly 24 days after Elena had built that fire and waited to die. She was checking the territory borders with Shadow and Ember when she felt it. A disturbance in the forest. Something wrong. Something that made every hair on her body stand on end. "Hunters," Shadow said, his mental voice carrying an edge of warning. "Coming from the east, they carry silver." Elena's blood ran cold. Silver meant werewolf hunters, humans who had somehow learned about their existence and made it their mission to exterminate what they saw as monsters. She'd heard stories about them, whispered warnings in the Thornridge pack about staying hidden and never revealing their nature to outsiders. "How many?" she asked, already moving toward the disturbance. 10, maybe 12, Shadow reported. "They're tracking something, moving fast." Elena broke into a run, her pack flowing around her like water, silent and deadly. They reached a rocky outcropping overlooking a narrow valley just in time to see the hunters below. Shadow had been right. 12 humans, heavily armed with rifles and crossbows, all of the weapons gleaming with silver coating. And they were chasing someone. A werewolf burst from the tree line, running in wolf form, clearly exhausted and injured. Elena's breath caught because she recognized the fur pattern, the distinctive white stripe down the spine. It was Kira, a young Omega from the Thornridge pack, the same pack that had rejected and banished Elena. Kira had been kind to her once, years ago before the rejection, had shared her lunch when Elena's family was going through a hard time, had smiled at her in hallways when others looked away. The hunters were closing in, their weapons raising. In seconds, Kira would be dead. Elena didn't think, didn't consider the consequences or the danger, or the fact that saving someone from her old pack was probably the stupidest thing she could possibly do. She just acted. "Now," she commanded, and her pack responded instantly. 50 wolves poured down the hillside like a living avalanche, their howls echoing through the valley in a sound so primal and terrifying that the hunters froze in shock. Elena ran with them, somehow keeping pace despite her human form, her connection to the pack making her faster and stronger than she had any right to be. The hunters never stood a chance. The wolves didn't kill them, didn't need to. They simply surrounded them, teeth bared and eyes gleaming, making it absolutely clear that the humans were outnumbered and outmatched. The hunters dropped their weapons and raised their hands in surrender, terror painted across their faces. Elena ignored them, going straight to where Kira had collapsed near the tree line. The young wolf was shaking, her flank bleeding from a silver-tipped arrow, her eyes wide with pain and fear. When she saw Elena, those eyes went even wider with recognition and confusion. "Hold still," Elena said softly, her hands already working to remove the arrow. "This is going to hurt." She pulled the arrow free as quickly and cleanly as she could, then packed the wound with moss and bandages she'd learned to carry. Kira whimpered but didn't struggle, too shocked to do anything except stare at the human who'd been banished from her pack and the 50 wolves who were clearly following that human's orders. "Elena." Kira's mental voice was weak and confused. What are you?" "Something your pack didn't understand," Elena replied gently. "But we can talk about that later. Right now, I need to get you somewhere safe. Can you shift?" Kira tried and failed, too injured and exhausted to manage the transformation. Elena made a decision that was probably going to complicate her life in ways she couldn't imagine. She looked at Shadow. "We're taking her back to our territory. She needs proper care." Shadow's mental voice carried no judgment, just acceptance. "As you command, Alpha." It took most of the day to get Kira back to their main camp, a series of caves in the hillside that Elena's pack had claimed. The injured wolf drifted in and out of consciousness during the journey, carried by the larger pack members who took turns bearing her weight. Elena stayed close, monitoring her breathing and heart rate, using the connection she'd developed with Shadow to track Kira's condition through his enhanced senses. When they finally reached the caves, Elena had the pack settle Kira in the warmest, most protected chamber. She spent the next several hours treating the silver wound properly, drawing on knowledge she'd absorbed from her pack about herbs and natural remedies. Shadow stayed with her, lending his strength and experience, while Ember kept watch at the cave entrance. "Why are you helping me?" Kira finally asked when she was conscious enough to speak clearly. Her mental voice was stronger now, tinged with genuine confusion. "Your pack rejected you. They threw you out to die. I would understand if you left me to those hunters." Elena sat back, exhausted from hours of treatment, and met the young wolf's eyes. "You were kind to me once when you didn't have to be. That matters. And besides," she added with a small smile, "I'm not the same person who was banished from Thornridge Pack. I'm something else now. Something that doesn't hold grudges against wolves who are just following their pack's lead." "What are you?" Kira asked, looking around at the true wolves, who were clearly treating Elena with deference and respect. How can you command them? How are you even alive?" "It's a long story," Elena said. "But the short version is that I was never meant to be a werewolf. I was meant to be this, a leader of true wolves, a feral alpha. That's impossible." Kira's voice carried shock and disbelief. "Feral alphas are legends. They don't actually exist." "I thought the same thing," Elena admitted. "Turns out we were both wrong." Before Kira could respond, Shadow's mental voice cut through their conversation, urgent and warning. "Someone approaches. Werewolf. Strong. Coming fast." Elena stood immediately, moving to the cave entrance. She could feel it now, too, the presence of a powerful werewolf approaching their territory with purpose and speed. Not hunting, not wandering, but coming straight toward their location as if drawn by something specific. "Stay with Kira," she told Ember. "Shadow, with me." They emerged from the cave system to find a man standing at the edge of the clearing. He was tall and powerfully built, with dark hair and eyes that gleamed gold in the fading sunlight. Alpha, Elena recognized immediately. The power rolling off him was unmistakable. But what stopped her from calling her pack to attack was the expression on his face. Not aggression or threat, but something closer to awe. "You're real," he breathed, staring at Elena like she was something miraculous. "The feral alpha. I thought the reports were exaggerated, but you're actually real." "Who are you?" Elena demanded, very aware of Shadow at her side and the rest of her pack emerging from the surrounding forest, responding to her tension. The man bowed, a gesture of respect that seemed to come naturally despite his obvious power. "My name is Marcus Ironwood. I'm Alpha of the Crescent Moon Pack, and I've been searching for you for 3 weeks. Elena felt her hackles rise, metaphorically at least. "Why?" Marcus met her eyes steadily. "Because a feral alpha hasn't emerged in over 200 years. Because the true wolves have been disappearing from our territories, killed by hunters and werewolves, who see them as threats rather than allies. Because the old ways are dying, and you might be the only one who can save them." He took a step forward and Shadow growled low in warning. Marcus stopped immediately, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not here to fight you or take your pack. I'm here to ask for your help. The hunters who were chasing your packmate today, they're part of a larger organization. They're planning something big, something that will wipe out both werewolves and true wolves if we don't stop them. And to stop them, I need someone who can unite both species. Someone who can speak to true wolves and werewolves. Someone like you." Elena studied him carefully, using her connection to Shadow to sense whether he was telling the truth. Shadow's mental voice was thoughtful. He believes what he's saying, and his scent carries no deception. "What exactly are you proposing?" Elena asked. "An alliance," Marcus said simply. "My pack and yours working together. I'll provide resources, protection, and access to werewolf networks. You provide what no werewolf can. The ability to communicate with true wolves, to rally them, to create the kind of unified force that could actually stand against what's coming." "And what is coming?" "War," Marcus said quietly. "The hunters are planning a coordinated strike against every known werewolf pack in the Northern Territories. They've been gathering intelligence for months, mapping our locations, identifying our weaknesses. In 3 months, maybe less, they're going to launch a simultaneous attack designed to cripple us permanently. And after they destroy the werewolves, they'll turn their attention to the true wolves." Elena felt her stomach drop. "That's insane. How many hunters are we talking about?" "Hundreds," Marcus replied. "Maybe more. They've been recruiting across multiple states, stockpiling silver weapons, training specifically for this. And they're not just targeting alpha packs. They're going after everyone. Rogue wolves, true wolves, even humans who associate with us. It's genocide masquerading as protection." Kira limped out of the cave entrance, her voice weak but carrying clearly. "He's telling the truth. I heard rumors back in Thornridge Pack before I was sent on patrol. The elders were worried about increased hunter activity. They just didn't know the scale." Marcus's eyes widened as he recognized Kira. "You're from Thornridge, the pack that banished Elena." Kira's ears flattened in shame. "Yes, and we were fools to do it. Looking at what she's become, what she's accomplished in weeks, we threw away someone extraordinary because we couldn't see past our own limitations." Elena's response died in her throat because something was happening. She could feel it through her pack bonds, a disturbance in the forest, multiple presences approaching fast. Not hunters this time. Werewolves, a lot of them. Marcus turned, his body going tense. "That's my pack. I told them to stay back, but they must have sensed the tension." He looked back at Elena pleadingly. "Please don't let this turn into a fight. We came in peace." Elena was about to respond when the werewolves emerged from the tree line. 20 of them, all in wolf form, all clearly powerful and well-trained. They formed a defensive line behind Marcus, not threatening but ready to protect their alpha if needed. And that's when Elena's pack responded. 50 true wolves emerged from the forest on all sides, surrounding the clearing in a perfect circle. The werewolves tensed immediately, clearly not expecting to be so thoroughly outnumbered. "Stand down," Elena commanded, her mental voice cutting through the rising tension like a knife. "Both of you, we're not going to fight. Not today. And if Marcus is telling the truth, not ever. Because if what he says is real, if the hunters are planning what he says they're planning, then we have bigger problems than old conflicts between werewolves and true wolves." She stepped forward, positioning herself between the two groups, very aware that she was the only thing preventing violence. Shadow moved with her, a silent guardian, and Ember appeared on her other side. "Marcus is proposing an alliance," Elena said, speaking clearly so both groups could hear. "His pack and mine working together to stop a threat that could destroy us all. I don't know him. I don't trust him yet. But I know what I saw today. Hunters with silver weapons trying to kill a young wolf who'd done nothing wrong. And if that's just a taste of what's coming, then we need to consider his offer carefully." One of Marcus's wolves shifted to human form, a tall woman with silver hair and scars across her face. "You're asking us to ally with true wolves, to trust creatures we've been taught to fear? I'm asking you to remember that we're all children of the same goddess," Elena replied. "That the division between werewolves and true wolves is artificial, created by fear and misunderstanding rather than any real difference in our nature. And I'm asking you to consider that maybe, just maybe, a human who can speak to wolves and a feral alpha who was rejected by her own pack might be exactly what the goddess intended to bring us all back together." The scarred woman studied Elena for a long moment, then turned to Marcus. "She speaks well, Alpha, and her pack clearly trusts her completely. That's worth considering." Marcus nodded slowly. "What do you need from me, Elena? What would it take for you to consider this alliance?" "Information," Elena said immediately. "Everything you know about the hunters, their plans, their resources. And I want to meet the leaders of the other werewolf packs in the region. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it properly. Full transparency, full cooperation, no secrets, no hidden agendas." She felt Shadow's approval through their bond and drew strength from it. "You said war is coming. If that's true, then we need to start preparing now. But I won't risk my pack on vague promises and partial information. You want my help? You earn my trust." Marcus smiled, and there was respect in his expression. "Fair enough. I can have representatives from 6 major packs here within a week, and I'll share everything we know about the hunter organization, their leadership structure, their funding sources, their supply chains, everything." 1 week, Elena agreed. "But Marcus, understand this. If I find out you're lying, if this is some kind of trap or manipulation, my wolves will hunt yours to the ends of the earth. I protect my pack above everything else." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Marcus replied. "That's what makes you a true alpha." The week that followed changed everything Elena thought she knew about werewolf society. Marcus kept his word, arriving 3 days later with detailed intelligence about the hunter organization that made Elena's blood run cold. They called themselves the Silver Covenant, and they'd been operating in secret for over 50 years, slowly building resources and gathering support from humans who feared what they didn't understand. Marcus spread maps across the floor of Elena's main cave, pointing to marked locations. These are confirmed hunter strongholds, 23 bases across the Northern Territories, all within striking distance of major packlands. They've been watching us for years, learning our patterns, identifying our vulnerabilities. How did they stay hidden this long? Elena asked, studying the maps with growing dread. Surely someone noticed this kind of buildup. The scarred woman who'd spoken before, Marcus's second-in-command, whose name was Vera, answered grimly. They hid in plain sight. Gun clubs, hunting lodges, private security companies, all legitimate businesses with innocent exteriors. By the time anyone realized what they really were, they had too much infrastructure to dismantle easily. Kira, who'd recovered enough to shift back to human form, pointed to one of the markers. That's less than 30 miles from Thornridge territory. We had no idea they were that close. None of us did, Marcus said quietly. That's what makes them so dangerous. They've been patient, methodical, planning for decades while we remained oblivious. And now, they're ready to act. Shadow, who'd been listening from his position beside Elena, spoke into her mind with a question she transmitted aloud. What changed? Why are they moving now after 50 years of patience? Marcus's expression darkened. We think they have a new leader, someone with resources and connections we haven't identified yet, someone who's convinced them that the time is right to eliminate the werewolf threat permanently. Over the following days, representatives from other packs began to arrive. The Stoneheart pack sent their alpha, a grizzled old wolf named Thomas, who'd been leading his pack for over 60 years. The Moonwater pack sent their Luna, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire, who assessed Elena with obvious curiosity. The Nightshade pack, the River Run pack, the Thornwood pack, all sending their leaders or representatives to meet the feral alpha and decide whether this alliance had merit. What surprised Elena most was how they treated her, not with the dismissal and disgust she'd grown accustomed to from the Thornridge pack, but with genuine respect and fascination. These were powerful alphas and lunas who'd led packs for decades, and they looked at her like she was something extraordinary rather than something broken. Thomas was particularly interested in her connection to the true wolves. I haven't seen cooperation between our species in my lifetime, he said, watching as Shadow and Ember moved through the cave with casual authority. My grandfather told stories about the old days when werewolves and true wolves hunted together, protected each other. But that was over a century ago. Most packs today see true wolves as nothing more than animals. That's the problem, Elena replied. We've forgotten that we're family. True wolves and werewolves both come from the same source, blessed by the same goddess. The division between us is artificial, maintained by fear and ignorance. Claire leaned forward, her eyes intense. Can you really communicate with them? Truly understand what they're thinking and feeling? Elena nodded, then demonstrated by having Shadow approach Claire. The massive dark wolf moved forward slowly, and Elena felt his emotions flowing through their bond. Curiosity, assessment, cautious acceptance. She relayed this to Claire, who looked stunned when Shadow sat beside her and allowed her to touch his fur. He says you smell like moonflowers and old magic, Elena translated, and that you carry grief from a recent loss. Someone important. Claire's eyes filled with tears. My mate. He died 6 months ago protecting our pack from a rogue attack. How could your wolf possibly know that? Because true wolves see things we've forgotten how to see, Elena said gently. They read emotion and intention in ways that go beyond words or scent. They understand the heart of things. The demonstration convinced the skeptics. By the end of the week, all 6 packs had agreed to the alliance, pledging their resources and warriors to a unified defense against the Silver Covenant. But there was a condition, one that Elena hadn't expected. "We need a leader," Thomas said during the final council meeting. "Someone who can coordinate between packs, who can speak to both werewolves and true wolves, who commands respect from all parties. We need you, Elena. We need you to be our Alpha Supreme." Elena felt her stomach drop. "That's not possible. I'm not even a werewolf. I can't shift. I have no formal training in pack leadership." "You have something better," Vera said quietly. "You have the ability to unite us, to bridge gaps that have existed for generations. And you've already proven you can lead. Your pack follows you with absolute loyalty. You saved Kira despite having every reason to let her die. You stood between werewolves and true wolves and prevented bloodshed through sheer force of will. If that's not leadership, I don't know what is," Marcus added his voice to the argument. "The Silver Covenant is planning to attack because they see us as divided and weak. Individual packs fighting for territory and resources, too caught up in old rivalries to present a unified front. But if we had an Alpha Supreme, someone who stood above pack politics and commanded loyalty from all of us, we'd be stronger than they ever anticipated." Elena looked at Shadow, seeking guidance. His mental voice was calm and certain. "You were meant for this, Alpha. The goddess didn't give you these gifts by accident. She gave them to you because she knew what was coming, because she knew we'd need someone who could see beyond the boundaries that divide us." She looked around at the assembled leaders, at wolves who'd led packs for decades, and were now asking her to lead them all. The weight of it should have crushed her, should have sent her running back to the safety of her cave and her simple life with her pack. But instead, she felt something else. Recognition. As if this moment had been inevitable from the second she'd bandaged a dying wolf and refused to let him die alone. "I'll do it," Elena said quietly. "But understand this. I won't lead the way you expect. I won't play politics or make decisions based on tradition. I'll do what's right for all of us, werewolves and true wolves alike. And if that means breaking old rules or challenging old ways, then that's what I'll do." "We wouldn't expect anything less," Thomas said with a smile. "That's exactly why you're the right choice." The formal ceremony happened 3 days later, under a full moon that seemed to shine just for them. Representatives from all 6 packs gathered in a massive clearing that Elena's true wolves had helped prepare. Shadow and Ember stood on either side of her, as Thomas, the eldest Alpha present, performed the traditional ritual. Elena Ashwood, rejected by the Thornridge pack but chosen by the goddess herself. Do you accept the mantle of Alpha Supreme? Do you vow to lead with wisdom and strength, to protect all packs under your authority, to bridge the divide between werewolf and true wolf, and to face the coming darkness with courage? Elena felt the weight of every eye on her, felt the expectation and hope and fear. But she also felt her pack's support through their bonds, felt Shadow's absolute confidence, felt the rightness of this moment settling into her bones. "I do," she said clearly. "I accept this responsibility and this burden. I vow to lead not as a werewolf or a human or a feral alpha, but as someone who sees the worth in all of us. I vow to protect the weak, to honor the strong, to value the old ways while embracing necessary change, and I vow to face the Silver Covenant with everything I have to ensure that none of us die in the darkness they're planning." Thomas placed his hand on her head, and Elena felt power flow through the connection. Not pack magic exactly, but something older and deeper. The recognition of leadership, the transfer of authority, the acknowledgement that she now stood above all others in this region. "Rise, Alpha Supreme, Thomas said, his voice carrying across the clearing. Rise and lead us into the future. Elena stood, and every wolf present, werewolf and true wolf alike, bowed their heads in submission and respect. The sight of it, hundreds of wolves acknowledging her authority, should have been overwhelming. Instead, it felt right. Like coming home to a place she'd never been but had always been searching for. The preparation for war began immediately. Elena organized the packs into coordinated units, mixing werewolves and true wolves in ways that played to their respective strengths. True wolves had superior tracking and scouting abilities, could move through terrain that would slow werewolves, and their pack coordination was instinctive and perfect. Werewolves had the ability to shift between forms, to use tools and weapons, to think strategically in ways that pure instinct couldn't match. Together they were formidable. Separately, they would have been vulnerable. The Silver Covenant had planned their attack assuming the latter. They were about to discover the former. Marcus's intelligence network identified the hunters' planned strike date. 3 weeks from the council meeting, on the night of the new moon, when werewolf powers were traditionally weakest. The Silver Covenant intended to launch simultaneous raids on all major pack territories. They'd counted on the darkness working in their favor, on werewolves being separated and unprepared, on fear and chaos preventing organized resistance. What they hadn't counted on was Elena. What they hadn't counted on was true wolves who could see in perfect darkness and communicate across miles through bonds that transcended normal pack magic. What they hadn't counted on was an Alpha Supreme who'd spent weeks preparing defenses that turned every expected weakness into hidden strength. The night of the attack, Elena positioned herself at the central command point, a hilltop that allowed her to maintain mental contact with her true wolves across the entire region. Shadow was with one unit, Ember with another, and she had younger wolves positioned with each mixed pack to serve as communication relays. It was a network the hunters couldn't intercept or disrupt, because it existed entirely in the mental space that true wolves shared with their feral alpha. "They're moving," Shadow reported as midnight approached. 300 hunters mobilizing from the eastern stronghold. Silver weapons, incendiary devices, vehicles modified for rough terrain. They expect to hit Thornridge Pack first. Elena smiled grimly. Let them come. Thornridge Pack was ready, reinforced with true wolves and warriors from 3 other packs. The hunters were about to walk into an ambush instead of delivering one. The battle began exactly as the hunters had planned, which meant it went nothing like they expected. The first hunter units rolled into Thornridge territory, anticipating resistance from perhaps 20 or 30 werewolves defending their home. Instead, they found themselves surrounded by over 100 wolves, werewolf and true wolf, working in perfect coordination, cutting off escape routes, and neutralizing silver weapons before they could be effectively deployed. Elena monitored the engagement through her bond with the true wolves positioned there, feeling the flow of battle like she was experiencing it directly. The hunters were skilled and well-armed, but they'd trained to fight werewolves, not true wolves, who could predict their movements through pack bonds and coordinate attacks with inhuman precision. Eastern assault repelled, came the report from Shadow. Minimal casualties on our side, hunters retreating in disarray. Similar reports flooded in from the other territories. The Moonwater Pack had turned the hunters' planned night attack into a liability by using true wolves to guide werewolves through complete darkness, while the hunters fumbled with night vision equipment that the wolves knew how to disable. The Stoneheart Pack had collapsed several hunter approach routes, literally reshaping the terrain with coordinated effort that the Silver Covenant's maps hadn't accounted for. By dawn, the Silver Covenant's coordinated assault had been thoroughly and completely defeated. 300 hunters had attacked expecting easy targets and overwhelming victory. Instead, they'd encountered organized resistance that cut through their forces like a knife through silk. Some hunters escaped, fleeing into the wilderness with stories about impossible wolf coordination and supernatural tactical awareness. Many more were captured, disarmed, and handed over to human authorities with evidence of their planned genocide. But the victory, while significant, wasn't complete. Elena knew that. The leaders of the Silver Covenant hadn't been present at the attack, had kept themselves safely removed from direct combat. And as long as they survived, the threat remained. "We need to find them," Elena said during the War Council that convened the day after the failed attack. "The hunters who attacked last night were soldiers following orders. If we don't eliminate the leadership, they'll just rebuild and try again." Marcus pulled out updated intelligence. "We've been interrogating the captured hunters. Most don't know much, but a few mentioned a name: Alexander Crane. Billionaire industrialist with connections to anti-werewolf groups going back decades. We think he's been funding the Silver Covenant for years, and he recently took direct control of operations." Thomas looked troubled. Alexander Crane is protected by wealth and political connections. We can't just attack him like we would a hunter stronghold. He has security, lawyers, politicians in his pocket. Going after him directly would expose us to human authorities and start the very war we're trying to prevent. Elena felt something crystallize in her mind, a plan forming that was risky, but might be the only way to end this without endless conflict. What if we don't attack him? What if we expose him instead? Vera leaned forward with interest. "What are you proposing?" Elena laid out the idea she'd been developing. The captured hunters could provide testimony about the Silver Covenant's illegal activities. With the right pressure and the right evidence presented to the right authorities, Crane could be brought down legally. His wealth would become a liability instead of a shield, because the more resources he'd poured into the Silver Covenant, the more damning the evidence trail would be. Claire nodded slowly. "We'd need human allies, though. Journalists, law enforcement, politicians who aren't in Crane's pocket. People willing to believe that a billionaire has been funding a paramilitary organization dedicated to genocide." "We have those allies," Kira said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her, and she continued with growing confidence. "My sister works for a major news network. She's been investigating Crane for years on unrelated corruption charges. If we could give her evidence about the Silver Covenant, proof that connects Crane to weapons trafficking and planned mass murder, she'd run with it. And once it's public, Crane's political protection evaporates." "It's risky," Marcus said. "We'd be trusting humans with information about our existence. If it goes wrong, if they decide we're the threat instead of Crane, we could face something far worse than the Silver Covenant." Elena met his eyes steadily. "Living in fear of exposure is what kept us divided and vulnerable in the first place. Maybe it's time we stopped hiding and started building bridges with humans who can see us as allies rather than monsters. Not all humans fear what they don't understand. Some of them are curious, compassionate, willing to learn." Shadow pressed against her leg, his mental voice warm with approval. Spoken like a true Alpha Supreme. "Fear creates division. Courage creates connection." The plan came together over the following week. Kira reached out to her sister, an investigative journalist named Maya, who'd been trying to expose Crane's criminal empire for 3 years. When presented with evidence of the Silver Covenant, complete with testimony from captured hunters and documentation of weapon stockpiles and planned attacks, Maya initially thought it was an elaborate hoax. But the evidence was too extensive, too detailed, too well corroborated to dismiss. Elena met with Maya personally, a decision that Marcus and Thomas both argued against, but Elena insisted on. If they were going to trust humans, that trust needed to be real and personal, not filtered through intermediaries and carefully managed information. The meeting happened in a neutral location, a state park where Elena brought Shadow and Ember as both protection and demonstration. Maya arrived expecting to meet some kind of extremist or conspiracy theorist. Instead, she found a young woman who spoke with calm authority and traveled with 2 massive wolves who were clearly more than simple animals. "You're asking me to believe in werewolves," Maya said, her journalist's skepticism warring with the evidence of her own eyes as Shadow sat calmly beside Elena and allowed himself to be touched. "I'm asking you to believe in people who are different from you but no less deserving of life and safety," Elena replied. "Alexander Crane wants to commit genocide against my people. He's built an army, stockpiled weapons, and planned coordinated attacks across multiple states. That's not conspiracy theory. That's documented fact. And if you help expose him, you'll be saving thousands of lives while bringing down the criminal you've been hunting for years." Maya studied her for a long moment, then looked at Shadow. "Can he really understand us? Can you really communicate with him?" Elena smiled and nodded to Shadow. The massive wolf stood, walked to Maya, and gently took the journalist's phone from her pocket using his teeth. He carried it to Elena and dropped it at her feet, then returned to Maya's side. "I asked him to show you he understands commands and can problem solve," Elena explained. "True wolves are far more intelligent than humans give them credit for, and I can communicate with them in ways that go beyond simple commands. I can feel what they feel, understand their thoughts, coordinate their actions across distances that would make normal pack bonds impossible." "Prove it," Maya challenged. Elena closed her eyes and reached out through her bond to wolves positioned miles away. Within minutes, 2 more true wolves emerged from the forest, a young gray male and an older russet female, both moving with purpose until they sat on either side of Maya like an honor guard. "I called them from 5 miles away," Elena said. "Asked them to come and demonstrate that the bond between feral alpha and true wolves transcends normal limitations. This is what makes us dangerous to people like Crane. Not supernatural powers or monster strength, but coordination and unity that his forces can't match." Maya looked at the wolves surrounding her, at Elena's calm confidence, at the evidence she'd been given. Then she made a decision that would change everything. "I'll do it. I'll expose Crane and the Silver Covenant, but I need your help to make sure the story doesn't become about fear of werewolves. It needs to be about stopping a domestic terrorist organization that happens to target people with unique abilities." Elena extended her hand. "That's exactly the story we want told." "Welcome to the Alliance, Maya." The exposure happened 2 weeks later. Maya's network ran a comprehensive investigation into the Silver Covenant, complete with interviews from captured hunters, documentation of weapons stockpiles, and financial records connecting everything to Alexander Crane. The story was explosive, dominating news cycles and triggering federal investigations. Crane tried to discredit the reporting, used his political connections to muddy the waters, deployed his lawyers to threaten lawsuits. But Maya had built an airtight case, and public outrage over a billionaire funding a paramilitary organization dedicated to genocide proved impossible to suppress. Within a month, Crane was arrested, his assets frozen, and the Silver Covenant's infrastructure dismantled by federal authorities. The werewolf angle was handled delicately. Maya's reporting acknowledged that the Silver Covenant's targets were people with unique abilities, without explicitly confirming or denying the existence of werewolves. Some humans dismissed it as metaphor or exaggeration. Others looked at the evidence and began asking questions that would lead to broader understanding. But the story framed werewolves as victims rather than threats, which shifted public perception in ways that would have seemed impossible months earlier. In the aftermath, Elena found herself leading not just in war but in peace. The alliance between packs that had formed to fight the Silver Covenant remained intact, evolving into something more permanent. True wolves and werewolves continued working together, learning from each other, rebuilding connections that had been lost for generations. The Thornridge Pack, which had rejected and banished Elena, sent a formal delegation requesting to join the alliance. Their new alpha, a young wolf named Derek, who'd taken over after Colton was removed for incompetence, offered a public apology for how Elena had been treated. "We were wrong," Derek said simply, speaking before the full council. "We saw your inability to shift as weakness when it was actually a gift we lacked the wisdom to recognize. You've accomplished more in months than our pack achieved in decades. If you'll allow it, we'd like to join the alliance and learn from the unity you've created." Elena looked at him, at the pack that had caused her so much pain, and felt no anger or resentment, just acceptance and understanding. They'd been trapped by old thinking, unable to see beyond tradition to possibility. But they were willing to learn, willing to change, and that was enough. "Welcome to the alliance," she said. "Your pack's knowledge and resources will strengthen us all. But understand that joining means accepting true wolves as equals, means valuing gifts in all their forms, means choosing unity over division in everything you do." "We understand," Derek replied, "and we're ready to be better than we were." Kira, who'd stayed with Elena's pack during her recovery, and found she preferred the openness and acceptance to Thornridge's rigid hierarchy, chose to remain as one of Elena's primary advisors. She became a bridge between Elena and the werewolf packs, someone who understood both worlds and could help translate between them. One evening, 6 months after the battle with the Silver Covenant, Elena sat on the hilltop where she'd coordinated the defense of the packs. Shadow lay beside her, his wounds from that first night fully healed, his presence a constant comfort. Ember was there too, along with Maya, who'd become an unexpected friend and ally in the months since her reporting had exposed Crane. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you'd never been rejected?" Maya asked. "If you'd stayed in Thornridge Pack and lived a normal life?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I think I would have been miserable. I would have spent my entire life trying to be something I wasn't, trying to fit into a space that was never meant for me. The rejection was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But it was also the best thing, because it freed me to become what I was actually meant to be." Shadow's mental voice rumbled with approval. "The goddess's plans are not always gentle, but they are always right." Marcus joined them on the hilltop, his expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about the future," he said, "about what comes next now that the immediate threat has been dealt with." "What do you see?" Elena asked. "Possibility," Marcus replied. "We've proven that werewolves and true wolves can work together. We've shown that humans can be allies rather than enemies. We've created something new here, something that doesn't fit into the old categories of pack and territory and species. The question is whether we can maintain it, whether we can build on it, or whether we'll drift back to old patterns once the crisis has passed. Elena looked out over the territory she now protected, at the forests where her true wolves ran, and the settlements where werewolf packs lived in peace. She thought about everything that had changed since that night when she'd built a fire and waited to die. How one act of compassion, one choice to help a dying stranger, had cascaded into transformation on a scale she'd never imagined. "We maintain it by choosing it every day," she said finally, "by remembering that unity isn't a destination but a practice, by valuing the connections we've built and refusing to let old fears and divisions pull us apart, and by teaching the next generation that the old ways of separation and mistrust don't have to define the future." Kira smiled, spoken like a true Alpha Supreme. In the years that followed, Elena's leadership would be tested in ways both large and small. New threats would emerge, old rivalries would flare up, and the work of maintaining peace between werewolves and true wolves would prove to be an ongoing challenge rather than a finished achievement. But the foundation had been laid, the possibility proven, and the path forward made clear. The rejected Omega, who'd been told she was worthless, who'd been cast out to die alone in the wilderness, had become the Alpha Supreme, who united species that had been divided for generations. She'd built a fire to save a dying wolf and ended up saving entire communities from destruction. She'd been rejected by those who couldn't see her value and embraced by those who could. And when young wolves came to her seeking guidance, feeling broken or different or lost, Elena would take them to meet her pack. She'd show them Shadow and Ember and all the other true wolves who'd chosen her as their alpha. She'd tell them about the night she'd waited to die and how 50 wolves had emerged from the darkness to show her that being different wasn't the same as being worthless. "Your pack doesn't define your worth," she'd tell them. "Your inability to fit into someone else's expectations doesn't make you defective. The moon goddess gives us challenges not to break us, but to reveal what we're truly capable of becoming. Trust in her plan, trust in yourself, and know that somewhere out there, your true pack is waiting to recognize you for exactly what you are. And if some young Omega listening felt their hope rekindling, if they left believing for the first time that maybe their difference was a gift rather than a curse, then Elena knew she'd fulfilled her purpose. She'd become the person she'd needed when she was lost and alone. She'd become the leader who saw worth in all forms, who valued connection over division, who proved that sometimes the greatest power comes from compassion rather than strength. The fire Elena had built that first night had long since gone cold, but the warmth it represented, the choice to help rather than abandon, to connect rather than isolate, to save rather than allow suffering, that fire burned brighter than ever. It lit the way for others who were lost, warmed those who'd been left in the cold, and proved that even in the darkest moments, even when death seems certain and hope seems foolish, one small act of kindness can change everything. Elena Ashwood, the rejected Omega who became Alpha Supreme, had learned the most important lesson the moon goddess had to teach. That true strength isn't measured by the ability to shift or fight or dominate. True strength is measured by the courage to remain compassionate when the world teaches you to be cruel, to choose unity when division seems easier, and to see value in yourself and others even when everyone else has given up. She'd built a fire for a dying wolf and discovered her destiny. She'd saved a stranger and been saved in return. She'd been rejected by one pack and embraced by dozens. And in the process, She'd proven that sometimes the broken ones, the different ones, the ones everyone else dismisses, are exactly what the world needs to become whole again.